c'est gentil ça, oui, effectivement.
Ça va, on est en anglais. Bonjour.
Il y a des petites bouteilles d'eau. Ah, vous n'avez pas besoin?
Pas les grandes, je vais prendre une petite parce que c'est trop. Je vais prendre, voilà, parce que comme ça, on n'a pas besoin de verre et si ça se renverse pas.
Ah,
Vous voyez ce que je veux dire?
oui, oui.
C'est plus pratique d'avoir une bouteille dans la cabine que.
Mais il faut en avoir deux. Hein.
Oui, il faut en mettre une pour le collègue.
Moi, je change entre-temps.
Vous êtes dans une cabine ici?
Mais pas pour le moment, après la pause.
Ah, d'accord.
Donc après la pause, mais...
Ah, c'est déjà écrit. Ah, c'est parfait. Oui, oui, oui.
Là, mais c'est seulement pour une expérience.
Oui, pour une expérience. Oui, donc il manque ici le français pour aujourd'hui. Mais ça va, on peut l'expliquer comme ça. Oui, oui, c'est logique. Très bien.
Okay. Mais Anouk parle en français, donc il traduit en italien.
Okay, good morning everyone. There'll be some interventions in Italian and in Dutch later on, so please pick a headset. Most of the interventions this morning will be in French, and if you want to listen to the French is on channel 13. Le micro de madame ne fonctionne pas.
C'est l'enregistrement et c'est vous qui êtes tout le temps dans le streaming.
L'anglais.
English, can you hear the English? Can you hear the English? Channel 14. I am talking, testing the English. Does it work? Yeah. Testing the Dutch now.
L'italiano è sul canale 12. Funziona già? L'italiano è sul canale 2.
Testing the Italian channel, which is channel 12. Does it work? Does the Italian work? Okay, good. So we're testing languages. Spanish works, yes. German. German, does it work? Yes. So welcome everybody, and I hope you had a good night's sleep. So the two of us will be in charge of today. And so I am Nurien from Belgium. There seems to be an issue with the Serbian translation or Spanish. Okay. So we're still testing languages, making sure it works. There seems to be an issue with the Italian language. Okay, in the meantime, please turn off your mobile phones. Don't just simply put them on silence mode or flight mode. They should be turned off completely, please. We're also going to be streaming this event live throughout the world, so I don't know if we're online. Are we online already? Yes. So welcome to anybody who's with us from, well, wherever you might be online. This is the second day of our Congress here in Belgium, and we have an extremely rich program planned for today with a lot of experts and a lot of opportunities for people to exchange about their experiences. So is everybody with us? We're still checking whether the Spanish translation works. We need a technician, please. We need a technician to help us. Do we have to wait any more time before translations are all, online? Meaning Serbian and Spanish, which seems to be there seems to be an issue there.
Ça, vous ne pouvez pas faire, c'est ça qui fait sauter.
Oui, peut-être. Oui, entre-temps, peut-être quelqu'un veut dire quelque chose sur hier.
So in the meantime, any reaction about yesterday? We started yesterday with the first topic, which is sharing. So if you want to share about an experience, if you want to share about anything, please feel free. Do you remember the motto, the leitmotif that we shared yesterday when we threw the dice? Does anybody remember? Maybe not. So let's continue anyway. Now, what we would like to do now is anticipate a little bit on the program. We had planned for an exchange of experience, and we know it's not always easy for people to take the floor in front of a large audience. So what we want to do is divide the group into smaller groups where you'll be able to talk about your experiences and what you do, what you've done. So you can break into small groups and talk with people about what you do, what you've done.
Voilà, n'hésitez pas à vous retourner, à faire des petits...
So you can just, talk to people around you.
Voulez-vous parler un peu pour essayer parce que le serbe va apprendre d'ici.
1, 2, 3, testing the English.
Voilà, on va vous demander de clôturer doucement. We gaan u vragen om af te sluiten. Voilà.
Voilà, merci.
Okay.
Apparemment, c'était un échange très intense. Vous avez
Apparently, this has
découvert
been an
notre
interesting
raison
time
et
and an intense exchange of
on
experiences.
développe une culture toute particulière pour notre congrès ici. Nous, on va continuer maintenant.
We're going to continue
C'est
with
mieux
the
comme ça, on vous
program.
entend mieux, je pense.
Voilà.
Alors,
So we're going to
il y
continue
a
with
eu
the
hier
program.
cette phase du dé là, mais aujourd'hui on voudrait refaire l'expérience
We started
de
yesterday
laisser le dé guider
with
un peu
the
notre journée et au
dice
niveau des dialogues.
guiding
On va
us
demander à
yesterday. We're
Daniel
going to
peut-être
do
de
the
venir
same
lancer
today.
le dé
And maybe
pour
Daniel,
tous
you can come
et
over
nous dire
and
quel est le mot
throw the
qu'on
dice.
suivra aujourd'hui.
Voilà. Qu'est-ce que c'est écrit?
Build relationships every day.
Build
Construire
relationships
des relations
every
tous les
day.
jours. Alors, comme hier, une invitation. Si vous avez maintenant déjà une idée,
So if you have anything to say, any experience that you want to share
récemment ou moins récemment,
recently or less
Et,
recently, obviously,
toujours nous la
you
partager. Et
can,
sinon, on vous invite aussi
share
à
that with
dialoguer
us.
là-dessus pendant les pauses qui seront
and
aussi
you can always, of
aujourd'hui.
course, talk
Et,
with
demain matin, on
participants
aura le même
during the
exercice,
coffee
alors on
breaks
espère
or even tomorrow.
qui remonteront.
And I'm sure and I'm hoping
Merci,
that you
Daniel,
will be talking about
pour cette valeur.
you know, your
Construire des
experiences. So
relations.
building relationships every day.
Merci. Alors maintenant, j'espère que le problème des traductions, ça va être résolu.
I'm hoping it
Voilà,
works now.
des signes positifs. Le
I think
ça fonctionne.
Serbian is online.
Très bien.
Yes,
Et
it
l'espagnol
works.
aussi.
Spanish, does
Quelle
it work?
joie.
Okay, good.
Cette complexité des
Good
langues,
news.
c'est toujours un défi. Et voilà. Donc aujourd'hui, on va arriver à un point très important. On a
So we
la professeure
are approaching
Grevin qui est
an important moment here.
qui va- je
We've
vais
got
venir
with us
ici sur
Professor
le podium.
Anouk Grevin. I'd like to invite you on stage, please.
Et voilà, vous pouvez faire un petit applause. Anouk Grevin, elle est professeure de management.
Anouk
à
Grevin teaches
l'Université de Nantes.
management at
Elle est
the
aussi
University of
enseignante à
Nantes in
l'Institut
France.
universitaire Sophia à Lopiano.
She also
Et elle est
teaches at
membre de
the
la
Sophia
Commission internationale de
University
l'économie des communautés.
faculty in Loviano.
Et elle est aussi
She's
auteure
also
Ensemble avec Luigino Bruni qui est aussi
together
avec
with
nous aujourd'hui.
Lucino Bruni, who is with us. She's also
Ensemble avec Luigino Bruni, elle est
the
auteur du
author
livre
of a
avec
book
le titre L'économie silencieuse.
called The Silent
Et
Economy.
aujourd'hui, elle va nous donner des pistes de réflexion
And
sur des
the,
études en cours dans les entreprises.
Presentation
de
that she's going to share now with us is
Voilà.
going to
Anouk.
focus on existing and ongoing studies on the companies of the economy of communion. I'll try not to be too fast,
Vous m'arrêtez.
and if I'm too fast for the interpreters, please let me know.
Ça n'est pas un exposé en bonne et due forme.
I'm not going to
Aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment
make
quelques
a very
réflexions
formal
sur les études
presentation here.
qui ont
What I want to do is
commencé
share
ces derniers temps, mais qui sont
some
pas du tout encore
reflections
abouties.
on
Mais il y a ça
various
fait
studies
germer
that
un
are
petit peu
ongoing
quelques réflexions
in
qui
various
me tournent dans la tête et que je vous partage comme
enterprises or companies. So it's by no way a completely finalized study that I'm going to share.
sur le terrain tous les
Not
jours.
at all, but I think it's already maybe, I mean, it's useful to share some ideas, basic ideas about what it means to run a company
de ce que c'est.
of the economy of communion.
Alors,
And hopefully that can be useful to you.
voilà, je mettais en préambule hein, que que ce sont que je vais
No,
mentionner ici quelques
the
recherches.
preamble of what I'm going to say
mais
is
que
first
ça-
that we
ça
need,
n'est pas encore au
you
stade de
need to understand
résultat,
that this is
c'est
very,
vraiment
very
quelque chose,
preliminary
que je
research
vous
still,
partage comme
so
ça de-
I'm not sharing results,
des
I'm just
intuitions.
sharing intuitions, ideas, and first thoughts about
Puis petit à petit, on va aussi porter jusqu'au bout ces recherches. Et,
this subject, and
voilà.
then of course we are still ongoing,
dire
I
un
mean
petit peu des choses
continuing
plus
and
solides
working
sur
on
le
this,
sujet.
this is ongoing.
Et puis, je
And
voulais aussi
we'll
dire
be
que
refining our knowledge as time passes. Now, I also want to say that this, of course, is a challenge. Living the economy of communion is something that you do on a daily basis, and it's not because I'm going to mention certain companies that what I'm going to say is perfect or should be considered as an example for others. No, I'm going to share some aspects of some particular experiences, those work, but it doesn't mean it's perfect, and it doesn't mean those companies that are doing well now may not be facing a lot of challenges anyway. So where are we in terms of the current research? So where do we stand in terms of current research on the economy of communion?
Alors, où est-ce qu'on en est? Quelques mots peut-être sur les entreprises sur lesquelles.
So a few words maybe
un
to
défaut aussi, ça pour le coup, pas de profs et de
present
chercheurs.
maybe
Normalement,
the
quand on parle
companies
de
that we've
recherche,
looked into. Usually, when you're a research expert, you don't actually name companies. You hide the names by using codes, but I've tried not to do that. I've, of course, given some nicknames to some of the companies that I'm going to talk to you about. Now, what we did was work with a student, a Brazilian student who works for us and is preparing his PhD. So we've named the company Do It Yourself, that's the Belgian one. There's another one called, which we've nicknamed Fluid in Italy. We've got 70 workers in both these companies, and then we've got a Brazilian company, we've named that one Nutri Clinic. They have 60 workers and they sell clinical nutrition products. The first ones are domestic equipment in Belgium, and the Italian one is one that does precision mechanics. We've also got another Italian PhD student who's working with us, and he's looked at a company called Beton in Argentina, 33 employees, they work in the field of the construction sector. And then another Argentinian company called Cookies with 22 workers and 4 in Brazil, they produce biscuits. And then another company which we've nicknamed Cleanup in Paraguay, 750 workers, they do cleaning and maintenance services. Add to that a French one, which I have looked into some time ago already, 17 workers, called Assure in the insurance sector. And then a company that produces soap, 40 workers there. And then a company in the Philippines, nicknamed Banco, obviously it's a bank, it's a development bank, 370 workers there. So these are the companies that we have looked into, either myself or the students that I tutor. Now, we visited the managers of those companies and also talked and interviewed the workers. So we came to those companies and with a set of questions, but questions that, of course, were different. Given the different background, I would say, of those companies. The first student that I mentioned about asked, when you work within the economy of communion, does that produce or does that generate a specific culture? Second question, does that mean the company is organized in a different manner? So from a structural and organizational point of view, are these companies any different from normal companies? Are they managed differently? And then are we facing, I would say, economy of communion companies, meaning everybody's involved, or are we only talking about, I would say, CEOs or managers that focus on that particular kind of economy, and maybe the workers do not? And then we ask other questions in order to truly understand how these companies operate. Now, first aspect, how are these companies organized? First, of course, obviously you see, and it's a recurring aspect, you see that those companies are organized differently. A lot of people mention, for example, the right to make mistakes, trust, confidence, open communication, freedom to say whatever you want, even criticize your boss. People talk about participative management, they talk about a family kind of company, and this leads to a type of management which I would call based on subsidiarity with more participation. Now, is this because of the economy of communion? Maybe not. After all, we're talking about very small companies or small companies, SMEs, and maybe those companies, because they are so small, work on a rather informal set of rules and principles. So is this participative approach the result of just these companies being small, or is it because they are part of the economy of communion? I can't answer that question yet. And of course, we'll see what happens maybe when those companies grow. Will they evolve? Will they change? Will they start being managed differently? We don't know. What's also interesting maybe, and it's a question that a lot of people ask, including those company managers, if I disappear, then what will happen to my company? If I have this approach to managing a company, then when I go, when I retire, when I give the company away, then what happens? So we don't know. These are open questions still. Although two of the companies I've listed earlier are interesting. The one in the Philippines, which is a bank, is an interesting example because that particular company is trying to make sure that the current company culture remains actually active and valid, even though the managers are slowly moving away from the company because they are nearing retirement age. And they're working a lot on the issue of culture, on how to train people to maintain that sort of company culture. They use what are called rituals to try and embed that culture into actual daily activities. Another interesting company is one that Maxime looked into. We've called that one Cleanup. It's a bigger company. It's got 750 workers, almost 800 now, by the way. And I think what's very, very interesting there is that when Maxime started studying that particular company, he told me this is an inverted pyramid. It feels like an almost a cooperative where everybody sort of feels the company belongs to them. I mean, all the workers do. Now, this is a company that originally was set up to give work to women in extremely vulnerable economic situations, so women who normally would have been excluded from the labor market. All of these women, of course, now feel that this company is excessively important to them and to all their co-workers. So there is this feeling of the company belonging to them. And I think there's a lot of recognition there. There's a lot of almost love for the project. This is not just a one-man or one-woman, in this case, CEO, developing a company. Everybody's involved. All the workers feel the company has to do well, because if the company does well, if you have more clients, that means more people, more women can be hired and find a job there. And there's a huge feeling there of togetherness and trying to work in the best possible manner to provide the best cleaning services and also help the company do well. So those are, of course, interesting elements. And again, as I said earlier, this is a company that is a very, it's based on subsidiarity, basically, and on a very diverse approach to company management. No, it's probably what you could call a very social company or a very social business, a company for the poor, by the poor. Now, the next point which I want to talk about, and I'll spend most of my time on this, because I think this is key. I don't know if we've been able to measure this, by the way, but it's how to share the profit. I mean, the companies make money and they make profit. How is that shared? And how is the economy of communion contributing to maybe a different approach to profit sharing? And I think when we look at this particular aspect, and when you talk about this with employees, usually employees do not really know much about the profit sharing system in place. We've talked to people. In many cases, people know very little about the economy of communion. The little knowledge that they have, however, is extremely important. I mean, people working for those companies know they're working for a different kind of company. They know that their employer is not there to make money for a few people only. And this is something that's extremely relevant, extremely meaningful, and they have this understanding that those companies are different, making money not for a few, but for, if possible, everybody involved with the structure. This is key for many workers, and I know that many company managers find talking about that very difficult. It's not easy, and there are obvious reasons that explain why it's not always easy. I personally am very interested in giving donations, financial donation. If you give out money, usually you keep that secret. I mean, nobody in the right mind of state would give money and then boast about it or talk about it. No, what you do is you usually keep quiet. So the more you give, the more quiet you usually keep that fact. And this is why, in many cases, those company managers find it hard to explain what they do. Also, we know, second reason, that the economy of communion is a very demanding approach, and it's not always easy to be totally and always in line with the basic principles of the economy of communion, because as soon as you go out of, as you don't respect one of your key principles, you feel bad about it. So it's difficult to talk about that, because talking about it means raising the bar constantly and then pointing out more easily all those mistakes that you make, because everybody makes them. And also, many of those company managers have told us that they tried to talk about the economy of the communion, and it wasn't easy, or it led to a misunderstanding or to some sort of crisis. So when we do research, of course we talk to people, and people, often have told us their understanding of what happens in the company. And they are often telling us that yes, the company is doing well, the company is great, the company is different, the company is open to them. And I think despite the mistakes, despite the problems, maybe things are still happening. And in certain cases, in most cases, people understand why their manager does certain things, and I think the company manager often doesn't want to talk about certain things, but the workers understand what's going on. The workers can read what's going on and are able to understand that their manager is not always someone who can talk about things, because it's not easy, but still they trust them. And we've said that with Herman. Herman is here. And Herman understands, I think now as a company manager, that yes, he should talk to his people about the company, about what it does. I'm not saying everybody has reached that point yet. And yes, sometimes as a company manager you feel you can talk, but it's not always the right time to do that. So why do people talk about what they do and why they do it when they have this very peculiar approach to a company? Well, everybody has got their own reasons. Now, a few points I want to make about this, or maybe before, some facts that I'm going to share. And one fact that has been shared already, the do-it-yourself company, they have set up a system which I think is very interesting. Now what they say is this: we're a company, we make money, we try to share that money, and we try to share the profit. So maybe what we can do is do this in a more creative manner. So what they've set up is what they call the check. It's a €250 check. So employees in that company can decide where that money is going to go. Who is going to receive that amount of money? It's a small amount, maybe, because it has to be given. I forgot to say that it has to be given to an association or an NGO. So you're a worker in that company, and you have the right to choose who is going to get this check of €250, and that creates a sort of mental attitude where sharing and giving money away is a given. It's part of the idea of the company, sharing money, and they go one step further by allowing their employees to do that themselves, to share some money with others. So it's an interesting experience, I think. And Herman, who's here, can also say a few words about that, because that the particular company is managing, they are also distributing 30% of their profit, and they're allowing workers to decide where that money is going to go. And I'm sure there are similar experiences out there. Now, a few challenges now maybe that we still need to look at. First, how do we embed that particular company culture into the organizational system? Because you have certain principles, but those principles have to be translated into practical forms of organizing the company, and it's not easy. And then I mentioned subsidiarity earlier. How do you actually set up a company that is truly based on this subsidiarity approach? And then I mean, that's not easy. It's still an open question. Third open question, Eric, who's working as a Brazilian student working on his PhD, is looking at the various levels of involvement for workers. Some workers know that they work for a special company, let's say. Then you can go up to the next level. Once you know what's happening in your company, you may approve of it. Then you can actually agree to the principle and say, well, if I had my own company, I would do the same. Not everybody agrees with that, but some people do. There's a sort of transmission. And then there's, the next stage, which is you as an employee in the company are advocating for the principle to be implemented in other companies, and some people at Mi Banco in the Philippines are now actually trying to do the same in their own village, and that's perhaps the ultimate stage where you repeat the experience. And then finally, how can we share truly what is the heart of the economy of communion, which is basically sharing value, sharing wealth. And since we have created wealth together, how we can, of course, share that. I mean, the capitalist system states that a lot of people can contribute to creating wealth, but that wealth is not distributed equally, and it only goes to certain people. Now, how can we actually really share this other approach to a company that truly goes away from this capitalistic vision of society?
Last week I had a meeting and we were listening to a colleague talking about dialogue and the Russian experience, and he quoted this sentence. I can't remember it exactly, but I can't read it. It reminds me of the economy of communion. The meaning of our actions is given more by the interest in upstream than the value downstream. And so in many companies there is a speech put forward on values, and this is not so easy to have an impact in the field. And so we have to look at what the company aims at doing, and we have to see what will be the impact on workers. And this is one of the key points of the economy of communion, to have an impact on the finality and not just having words. Yes, sometimes facts are not well known, and these facts are not well known, as I've said. And of course, isn't this the strongest speech for the economy of communion? This is the question I'm raising, and I would like to hear what you have to say about this. So, at the same time, all this is quite complex. I realized that the companies which went further in these less hierarchic models, and there are many saying we have no bosses in our company, and it's a real will chosen fact. But yes, some companies do claim this, and I was struck by the fact that in a research Congress I was attending, some companies have this type of approach. They are not linked to the economy of communion, but often workers were telling them, yes, it's okay, we are all responsible, we are all contributing to this. And so the wealth we are creating all together, what will be our say on the way it is going to be shared? And it's true, it's a question we can put forward. I was wondering the same. I mean, the question is put to us, and implicitly in some companies, because if you associate people to everything, they will want to have a say there too. And so how are you more the owner of your company, and how to make the good choices? And this is going to raise many questions, of course. And it's not as simple as that. In the economy of communion, maybe that we have two things separated. On the one hand, the gifts of the profit, and then what we want to try to make lively within the company. And this is important, and this is what is at stake in some companies. But it's not simple at all. I think that it's very demanding. On the contrary, we are in systems where, in fact, there are still inequalities, de facto inequalities, even if there aren't differences in wages from 1 to 400. 1 to 4 is already a big difference. And so it's not simple to take up all these matters, and we know that it's quite a delicate problem. Yes, when we tackle these matters, we are going to deal with what is at the very heart of the company, and we have to see what to do with this. It's delicate, but also very interesting. And so we'll listen the testimony of Maxime later on. He studied a few companies, and also Herman, and he also worked in his company. And we have about 10 minutes left to listen to your reactions and your experiences. In Italian, I would like to know if you could talk about the impact on providers or the other companies in contact with that company. Is this culture transmitted outside of the company also? And what is at stake here? What are the stakeholders who can answer this? The speaker is translating the same question. So who are the people open to this culture, and how is this being transmitted, in what circumstances? So this is an excellent question, I must say. And it is obvious that there is an impact, because there are many experiences of this, and for the moment I haven't been studying this, so I don't have too many elements in hand. But in the Banco experience in the Philippines, a study was carried out by an external consultant. He didn't know anything about the economy of communion. They were studying the social impact of the company. It was a microcredit experience, and so they were trying to see what was the impact on the reduction of poverty. The surprise was to find there that not only there was a reduction of poverty in different fields, but there was also the transmission of this gift culture, the culture of giving. And so I was talking with Kay here. She's Filipino. When I tried to carry out this study in the Philippines, I had underestimated the cultural element, and it's true that I should have to go back there with a local person from the country to know more about the situation, because workers in the Philippines are, of course, repeating the official speech wholeheartedly, and it's very difficult to know what they really think about it, and I haven't had the right code to be able to read all this. And Herman told me also about his company, and he said you only looked at the inside. If you had also studied the outside, you would have seen what it had produced outside. And Maxime had also told me right from the beginning of the research, he told me, you won't understand the company if you only go into the perimeter of the company. The company is within a whole community, and you have to look at the whole of the community. You won't understand what the company is producing if you don't do that. But you know, the research, the study had been conceived like that. I hadn't thought about it. It was too reduced. and we have interviewed workers. And so maybe that this year we should find something to go on with the company, the study within the company, to know what about those relations expressed outside the company. And I'm sure that we will find a lot of things, and we'll have to do this seriously, of course. Yeah? Another question? We can't hear. We can't hear the question. The mic is not on.
Est-ce qu'on entend?
Oui, voilà. Pour les traducteurs, c'est important le micro.
Yes, we need the microphone for the translators. No, we can't hear him. No, there's a problem. No, we'll change microphone. So do you have a specific model of the economy of communion? Do you have other models? Is the model of the economy of communion another definition, or do you also talk about social responsibility or other things of this kind? When I listen to you, I have the impression that all the characteristics that you are putting forward of this economy of communion are characteristics of the model social business. Thank you for this question. Of course, we've been raising this question for a while already. Luca has reflected on this quite a while. And indeed, when we look at what's happening in the companies, we can see that practices are well known, what is closer to the social business or social entrepreneurship or the economy of communion, but you know, there are things which are well known already, and so the question is still forward. And what I'm wondering, and we should deepen this, shouldn't we see if there is something to do with the sharing of profits and other types of sharing, of course, and some companies will reinvest the total amount, but I'm wondering also if maybe we haven't studied or explored enough another dimension. How is all this related to the communion it's creating? We don't have entrepreneurs on one hand producing profits, and this is the image we carry forward. Here we don't talk about enough about the side where profit is generated, and then what are we going to do with that? How is profit going to be used? And I believe that it is in interrelation, and today it's still too separated. So this is linked to the economy of communion understanding. I was in Argentina, and I would like Herman to share this with us. There is an experience interesting there. He is committed directly in a certain number of situations, and we can see how all this is in fact unified, how this communion is in fact impregnating all of those steps. Is it then going to be a different model? I don't know, we have to demonstrate this, still prove this. I agree with you. I have the impression that there is a difference mainly on the motivation, but not so much on the model. Yes, maybe. Yes. On the way we are conceiving things, what is inspiring people, and maybe also the religious motivation. Yes, maybe that this is an element that we should be deepening here. And these are questions we are raising, of course. There is another point. I mean, if this economy of communion is only one form of a broader system of social entrepreneurship, well, it's okay. We don't pretend to be a different model or an alternative model to others. In this vast trend, there are people doing things which are quite close to each other, I mean, they have different stimulation sources, but maybe that we are also one of those stimulations. Maybe that we have our own way of doing it, but we are part of this broader trend. And this is okay for us. It's okay for us to be part of this very vast trend. We are doing something prophetic today, rethinking the economy, and this is how we conceive ourselves today. We don't want to see the differences or say this is different in our system or model. No, we have to see what is in fact common to us, what is assembling us, and it gives us specificity, keeps us closer to others. I mean, people love the poorest, others want an alternative economy, others a different type of governance, and some people have gone further than we have done today. And last question, if we have a last question. If not, it's okay. Yes, one last question. I have a question on these the difficulties for entrepreneurs when they have to share the gift of profits. Well, a lot of entrepreneurs in the world, and I think about the United States here, they are giving big contributions to churches or religious communities. And also in the American law you have this fiscal exemption, and maybe that sharing in this way is something which goes to family. It's not universal. I mean, if I give money to my nephews if they are poor, if I share with the religious community I belong to, then well, for the enterprise community, it's different to see the difference, to make the difference, and it stays in the private sphere. But the question here is the following. We are going to try to see new practices, how to have the enterprise take part in this activity of fighting poverty. Could this become a more practical commitment of workers in the future? Yes, I would like to add a point here. Maybe in French or in English. So it's in Italian. We're waiting for the translation. So one of the characteristics, it's not the characteristic, is that what is typical from this project is that we have different forms of social business. Usually, we are trying to see how to express all this, and so we have to group different ways of living, the social corporate responsibility amongst them, and usually we can find this in specific trends. There are social cooperatives, also social businesses, and corporate social responsibility, and all this in one single network. And I believe that this is interesting. Yes, just one thing. What Luca is saying here is important, and we should explore this. First of all, because we need to fight poverty within the enterprise. It's a shared responsibility. And others have said, workers have said, I saw on the internet that my boss is saying things, and I wanted to join that enterprise. But then afterwards said, I don't know if this is really put into practice, but this could be an engine of motivation, a reason for motivation, greater than what we think, and maybe that we can share the project itself. And we have to try to understand this. It's not simple, but there is here an enormous leverage that we have underestimated. Maybe that the economy of communion itself should allow bosses to know better, to know more the whole relation with those who benefit from these aids. So to be able to put it forward, to have it within themselves and to share it with others. And so it's also our responsibility.
professeur Anouk.
Thank you, Professor Anouk.
Et pour cette riche recherche.
Thank you for this enriching research. And we are trying how the life of the entrepreneur, the motivation of the entrepreneur can become a culture and will influence the shape of the enterprise, and how an enterprise of the economy of communion can go on after the founder has left, because it became a culture of the enterprise. And so I also like what you said, the meaning of our actions are defined by our finality and our values. It's important. Values is important, of course, and this shows us the social impact of it. Also would like to tell people listening to us in the streaming, that they can be motivated also, and they could take part in the second part of the research with stakeholders in the future. Thank you very much, Professor. And now we have 45 minutes break, so you can go to the cafeteria and keep on discussing and talking to each other amongst yourselves. We will have now the break, and we come back here at 10:45. Thank you.